Hello and welcome back to Unsustainable. So today I thought I'd take a look at the question of human population. I was always of the mindset that there are just way too many people on this planet. This population can't be supported, we're draining all the natural resources. It's a crisis, a human population crisis. But I've recently heard that there are some other perspectives, so I thought it was time to take a closer look. There are now about 8.3 billion humans on Earth. It's an impressive number, but the real question is what that costs. Every one of us needs food, water, shelter, energy, land, materials, waste systems, and some kind of future. But every one of us doesn't use the planet equally, and that's where the question becomes difficult. Because when people ask, are there too many humans on Earth? They might mean several different things. They might mean, can Earth produce enough food? Or they might mean, can Earth support 8, 9, or 10 billion people living modern, comfortable lives? Or maybe they mean, can the climate, forests, oceans, rivers, soils, insects, birds, mammals, and coral reefs survive the pressure of one species becoming this numerous and this powerful? And I think that's what I've always had in mind when I've asked it. And yet there's another question. They might be asking something even more uncomfortable. How much of Earth are humans willing to leave for everything else? And that's a question that I'll dive a little bit more into, because I don't think the population issue is as simple as humans are the problem, because that can easily become a way to blame poor countries, women, migrants, or high fertility communities, while ignoring the much larger footprint of wealthy, high-consuming lifestyles. But I also don't think we can wave the number away. The number does matter. 8.3 billion is not ecologically meaningless. The issue is that population never acts alone. It acts through food systems, land use, energy use, inequality, waste, technology, politics, and the economic systems underneath it all. So maybe the question isn't just, are there too many humans, but a more complicated question, looking into how humans live and what the cost is to the rest of life. For most of human history, there simply weren't that many of us. Around the year 1800, the world population was around 1 billion, and today there are more than 8. Almost all that growth happened very recently in historical terms. Our World in Data describes this as an extraordinary change after thousands of years of very slow population growth. And the strange thing is how violently recent the explosion was. In just a few centuries, humans went from being one species among many, scattered across the planet, to becoming the dominant large animal force on Earth. We transformed forests into farms, grasslands into pastures, rivers into reservoirs, coasts into cities, mountains into mines, and the atmosphere into a waste dump for fossil carbon. Now, this population explosion didn't happen because humans suddenly became more reckless in one generation. It happened because of huge changes in medicine, sanitation, agriculture, infant survival, food supply, and technology. We became better at keeping humans alive. And in many ways, that's a success story, but it had consequences. A world built for 1 billion people is not the same as a world built for 8. And now it's a world heading towards 10, which raises even harder questions. And this is where the story has changed from the old overpopulation panic. Global population growth is slowing. The UN's World Population Prospects 2024 projects that world population will keep growing for another 50 or 60 years, reaching a peak of around 10.3 billion in the mid-2080s, before declining slightly towards the end of the century. Now, World in Data's summary of the 2024 UN revision notes that this projected peak has been brought forward, compared with some earlier projections, to around 2084 at just under 10.3 billion. So no, we are probably not heading toward endless human growth. Fertility rates have fallen in many countries. Some countries are already shrinking. Others will peak in the coming decades. But slower growth is not the same as ecological safety. Even if the world population peaks around the 2080s, that still means roughly 2 billion more people than today. 2 billion more people needing food, homes, transport, energy, materials, healthcare, infrastructure, and land. And if those 2 billion people are born into destructive systems, then a slower growing population can still keep pushing ecosystems beyond their limits. So population growth slowing is good news. It's not a rescue plan by itself. And there's also the point of inequality in terms of how much resources people use in different parts of the planet. People in poorer countries tend to use less resources environmentally, but poorer countries are always growing. So even if the population stayed the same as it is today, in 50 years, with poorer countries being wealthier, humans will use more resources. But this brings us to one of the big counter-arguments. Some people say Earth can support many more humans. And maybe we should take that seriously, at least at first, because the best version of that argument isn't ridiculous. It says human carrying capacity is not fixed. We're not like deer on an island. We invent things, we change food systems, we build denser cities, we improve sanitation, we develop new energy systems, we reduce waste, we grow food from less land, we shift diets, we use technology to loosen the limits that once constrained us. And in a narrow sense, that argument might be right. If the question is, can Earth produce enough calories for around 10 billion people? The answer might be yes, under the right conditions. The World Resources Institute frames the challenge as feeding nearly 10 billion people by 2050, while also reducing emissions, avoiding further deforestation, and not worsening poverty. Its Sustainable Food Future work argues that this is possible, but only with multiple changes at once. Reducing food loss and waste, shifting diets, improving crop and pasture productivity, protecting ecosystems, improving fish supply, and reducing agricultural greenhouse gas emissions. So the Earth can support more people argument isn't automatically silly, but it depends on what we mean by support. Can we produce enough calories? Maybe. Can we produce enough calories without destroying more forests, wetlands, grasslands, rivers, soils, and oceans? Maybe that's a bit harder. Can we support billions more people while also restoring biodiversity, stabilizing the climate, reducing pollution, and leaving space for other species? It's certainly something to think about. Feeding humans isn't the same as supporting a living planet. The planet can be productive and still be impoverished. The field of crops can feed people while replacing a forest that once held thousands of species. A pasture can produce beef while occupying land that used to be grassland, woodland, or habitat for large wild animals. A fishery can produce food while simplifying marine ecosystems. So when someone says Earth can support more people, my question is, support them how? At what level of consumption? With what diet? Using how much land? Powered by what energy? And producing how much waste? And leaving how much space for the rest of life? Earth's carrying capacity is not just one fixed number carved into stone. It changes depending on what we're trying to carry. Bodies, lifestyles, economies, or a living planet. Food is one of the clearest examples of this. Diet radically changes the land footprint of humanity. Our World in Data reports that if the world shifted to a plant-based diet, global agricultural land use could fall by around 75%, largely because grazing land and cropland used to feed animals take up so much space. It's an astonishing number. And I'm not saying everyone needs to switch to a plant-based diet. I eat meat. The point is broader than that. And is that the question of how many people Earth can support depends heavily on how those people live. 10 billion people eating land-intensive, meat-heavy diets is one possible future, while 10 billion people eating lower impact diets is a very different future. Carrying capacity changes with what's on the plate, and this is where the population question becomes a land question. How much forest becomes farmland? How much grassland becomes pasture? How much cropland is used to feed livestock instead of people directly? How much wetland becomes suburb? How much river water goes to irrigation? How much fertilizer runs into waterways? And after all that, how much living habitat is left? This is why population and consumption can't be separated. A billion more people living low consumption lives is not the same ecological event as a billion more people living like high consuming wealthy nations. And the reverse is also true. Even low per person consumption adds up when the number of people is enormous. Scale matters, lifestyle and systems matter. Reality remains very committed to being complicated. Another way people try to estimate whether humanity is beyond Earth's limits is through ecological footprint and biocapacity. Earth Overshoot Day compares humanity's ecological footprint with Earth's biocapacity. Basically, the demand humans place on nature compared with what ecosystems can regenerate in a year. In 2025, Earth Overshoot Day fell on July 24. Reporting based on Global Footprint Network's calculation described humanity as using ecological resources at about 1.8 Earth's worth of demand. Now this is just a model, a simplification, and it has limits. It combines different kinds of ecological pressure into one public-facing number, which can make it powerful as communication, but imperfect as a science. Carbon, cropland, grazing land, forests, fisheries, built-up land, these are not all the same thing. So I don't think we should treat Earth Overshoot Day as a precise planetary invoice sent from nature's accounting department. It has a warning light on the dashboard it's hard to ignore. If our current demand adds up to something like 1.8 Earths, then the issue isn't how many people exist, it's what kind of demand those people are locked into. And again, that demand is not evenly shared. Some countries and lifestyles use far more ecological capacity per person than others. So if we're talking about population honestly, we also have to talk about who is consuming what. Otherwise, the conversation becomes a moral dodge. Then there's the planetary boundaries framework. This is different than simply asking how many resources do we use. Planetary boundaries ask whether human activity is pushing major Earth systems beyond a safe operating space. The 2023 update published in Science Advances found that 6 of 9 planetary boundaries had been transgressed, suggesting Earth is now well outside the safe operating space for humanity. These include climate change, biosphere integrity, land system change, freshwater change, biochemical flows such as nitrogen and phosphorus, and novel entities such as synthetic chemicals and plastics. And this matters because population doesn't push planetary boundaries by itself. Population pushes through food, energy, land, water, fertilizer, pollution, waste, mining, housing, transport, and industry. More people can mean more pressure, but the pressure depends on how societies are organized. A dense city, powered by clean energy with efficient public transport and lower material waste, isn't the same as a sprawling, car-dependent development powered by fossil fuels. A food system built around legumes, grains, vegetables, and lower waste isn't the same as one built around heavy meat consumption, vast feed crops, and deforestation. A rich economy built around endless replacement and overconsumption isn't the same as an economy built around sufficiency, repair, and lower material throughput. So the relationship isn't simply more people equals more damage. It's more like population multiplied by consumption, technology, inequality, and governance. Which might be a bit less catchy, but it's a better explanation. And then there's a part that cuts through the abstraction, species. Because if someone says Earth can support more humans, a fair response is, what does that word leave out? The IPBES Global Assessment found that around 1 million animal and plant species are threatened with extinction, many within decades. A UN summary of the report also says 75% of the land-based environment and about 66% of the marine environment have been significantly altered by human actions. So when we ask how many humans Earth can support, we should also ask, how many other species are we expecting Earth to lose along the way? If supporting more humans means accepting more extinctions, then which species are we volunteering to lose? Is it orangutans, elephants, tigers, amphibians, pollinators? And I'm being literal. If the human future requires more farms, more roads, more suburbs, mines, dams, fishing, concrete, plastic, and waste, then the first species to suffer are going to be the ones that need space, old forests, quiet beaches, clean rivers, stable climates, intact food webs, or connected habitats. Predators get squeezed because they need prey and territory. Amphibians get squeezed because they're sensitive to pollution, disease, climate, and changes in water. Pollinators get squeezed by pesticides, habitat loss, and simplified landscapes. Coral reef species get squeezed by warming, acidification, pollution, and overfishing. Coastal species get squeezed by development, fishing gear, plastic, and rising seas. And the brutal truth is that there is no one species whose disappearance suddenly makes human expansion sustainable. Extinction is not a planning tool. Ecosystems don't work like that. They're networks, relationships, and food webs. They're mutual dependencies. And even when we don't fully understand what a species does, every species has a role. Whether it's pollinating a plant, feeding another animal, maintaining soil, filtering water, spreading seeds, keeping a population in check, or simply existing as part of a living world that doesn't belong to us. And that to me is the deeper moral problem with the argument that Earth can sustain more people. Maybe it's about optimizing for maximum human presence, but that's not the same as a good planet. A planet covered in dense cities, efficient farms, engineered food systems, and carefully managed human infrastructure might support a lot more human bodies, but maybe you'd lose some things that I truly love about this planet, like old forests, birdsong, coral reefs, a living ocean. It might be a very efficient human machine built on the ruins of everything that could not adapt to us. And this is where the population conversation becomes ethically dangerous, because historically, population panic has often been aimed in the wrong direction. It becomes very easy for wealthy countries to point at poorer countries and say, "You're the problem," too many children, too much growth, too much pressure. Meanwhile, wealthy lifestyles consume far more energy, land materials, meat, transport, and waste capacity per person. So if we talk about population without talking about consumption and inequality, we end up with a distorted picture. A baby born into a high-consuming wealthy society will usually have a much larger ecological footprint than a baby born into a low-income rural community. That doesn't mean population growth in poorer countries has no ecological significance, but it means blame is the wrong tool, and coercion is absolutely the wrong tool. A humane population conversation is not about controlling people, it's about giving people secure, dignified lives. Because the best population policies are education, healthcare, reproductive freedom, access to contraception, lower child mortality, women's rights, and poverty reduction. UNFPA frames family planning around voluntary, rights-based access to contraception, accurate counseling, comprehensive sexuality education, and reproductive agency. It describes its mission as making sexual and reproductive rights a reality so people can make informed choices about their lives and futures. When people are healthier, safer, better educated, and more able to make real choices about their lives, fertility rates tend to fall, and not because someone forced them, because people were given options. That's the version of the population conversation worth defending. Not fewer people through cruelty, freer people, safer people, healthier people, living in less destructive systems. So what actually helps? First, the human rights side. Universal access to voluntary reproductive healthcare, contraception, girls' education, women's rights, and lower child mortality, as well as poverty reduction and better healthcare. Then there's the consumption side. Less waste, less land-intensive diets, especially in high-consuming countries, clean energy, better designed cities, and lower material consumption, as well as infrastructure that doesn't require everyone to burn fuel just to participate in society. Then there's the biodiversity side. Protecting large connected habitats, restoring forests, wetlands, grasslands, rivers, and coastlines, reducing agricultural expansion, protecting oceans, reducing pesticide pressure, reducing pollution, leaving actual space for other species, not just sentimental concern after their habitat is gone. Because the living world needs space, not just sympathy. And while we say we love nature, we're taking every river valley, every coastline, every forest edge, every migration route, every quiet nesting beach, every dark night sky, and every piece of fertile land for ourselves. At some point we have to show some restraint. So are there too many humans on Earth? I don't think the honest answer is a clean yes or no. If we just mean ordinary people are the problem, then no. And if we mean poorer countries are having too many children, then the answer is definitely no. That's a dodge by people and countries consuming far more than their share. But if we mean that one species has become so numerous, so unequal, and so materially powerful that the rest of life is being pushed into the margins, then yes, that's hard to deny. It would be dishonest to pretend the numbers don't matter. But the number isn't acting alone. It's multiplied by consumption, inequality, technology, land use, waste, and an economy that still treats the living world as raw material. So maybe the deepest question isn't simply how many humans can Earth support. Maybe it's how much of Earth are humans willing to leave alive? Because there may be ways to feed 10 billion people. There may be ways to house more billion. There may be ways to reduce the impact of each person. But if the future we build leaves less forest, less ocean life, fewer insects, birds, intact ecosystems, and places where the rest of life can exist without being managed by us, then I'm not sure we should call that a success. A crowded planet can still be humane, but only if humans learn restraint, only if population is discussed alongside consumption, only if technology is judged by what it protects, not just by what it produces, only if wealthy societies reduce their share of the damage, and only if we stop treating every other species as something that can be traded away for more human expansion. Because there's no honest human population conversation that doesn't ask, what kind of world are we trying to leave behind? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks so much for watching.